Knock, knock.
Who's there?
I'm just not that into games.
I'm just not that into games. Who?
It's a podcast on now and Facebook Live.
So Andy, last week I got you to play 80 Days, which was a kind of a narrative storytelling game on mobile. And so I figured that this week would continue along with that theme and play a game called Reigns. So Reigns is a simple little mobile game where you play as the king of a castle, and your goal is to basically survive as long as you can as a ruler, and to try and, I guess, help people along the way. It's quite a very simple game. It's based around simple choices that you need to make as a king. So someone will come to you and say, hey, we need money for a well. And you go, oh, okay, yes or no. The gimmick of the game is that all your decisions are made through a Tinder-like interface of swiping right for yes and left for no, basically. The interesting thing about the game is at the top there are these 4 different bars that represent military and the church and people and money and things like that. And every decision you make has an impact on those different variables. Some of them make them go up and go down. And if they ever drop to 0, then you're overthrown because, you know, you've starved to death, or the people have risen up against you. But the interesting thing about the game is that if anything rises to the very top, you also lose the game. You know, the church overthrows you, or the military does. So the goal of the game is to try and balance out these different competing needs, but never let anything get too high or too low. And it's really interesting because you're making decisions that aren't necessarily the best for anyone, but made out of political necessity, which I think is a really interesting idea inside of a game. And it's quite a simple little game, and I thought it would be interesting to compare that to something like 80 Days, because this one's more emergent storytelling from a couple of simple rules and a couple of simple ideas, and each time you play it, it's a little bit different. Whereas 80 Days is more built around that heavy narrative to try and make the experience more interesting.
Okay, so there's 2 things that come to mind when you've been explaining this game to me. One is that 80 Days did try to have game-like elements inside it, and with the trading and
the conversation system.
Yeah. So, but I'm thinking of the trading, which was trying to be this sort of like resource allocation thing,
management,
a management allocation thing. And it didn't really work. Like, for me, it sort of slowed the game. Well, it seemed extraneous to the game. Like, it really didn't seem to have any impact either way. It just seemed to be something that I sort of needed to branch through. But also, I'm thinking back to Tropico 4.
Right.
Well, because of the whole ruler thing. And making decisions for different elements of society. So I suppose... And I really enjoyed the idea of what Tropico was trying to do. I might not have loved everything about Tropico, but I did enjoy certainly big aspects of that. So I'm hoping, because I do like a decent story, and I thought 80 Days got some things right, and I do like the idea of being a ruler.
That's not surprising.
No, it isn't.
Because, your opinion and your thoughts are the most important thing for everyone.
No, it was because I'm
a wanker. Sorry. I was just reading one of the comments from our viewers.
What viewer would say that?
None.
Probably all of them.
There aren't any there.
No. Okay, cool. That's great. There's no viewers.
It's hard for me to watch because Mum keeps hogging up all the bandwidth. Mum.
Damn. This is absolute burn. No, but what I was about to say was, I'm going to be optimistic. Even though I am mainly pessimistic about games, because I really do want someone to pull this off, like to actually play something that has something which feels like a game, but also something which is an actual story as well.
Right.
So I suppose we'll see what we see.
Let's go.
What an amusing anecdote, Ruby.
Best story ever. Speaking of great stories, Andy, what did you think of Reigns?
Well, it's definitely an interesting experience which you've given me to play, right? And I'm going to break my thoughts about the game into 4 sections.
Right.
So, and I'm going to start with what my initial impressions were. And the reason I'm going to start with my initial impressions is because I think you are right. The game is quite unique. Like, I'd never seen anything like it before. And I'd imagine even for gamers that it was, yeah?
It made huge waves in a lot of places because it was so unique. Paid games don't sell super well on mobile platforms, and Reigns proved everyone wrong by being something so out there and bizarre that people were like, actually, this is really cool. And then it made a Steam release, and that did really well, apparently. So, yeah. It got quite a positive response.
Okay, well then that makes me feel better about doing an initial impression section.
Mm-hmm.
So I started out playing with about an hour after work before I went to bed, and I got to say, even from that, like even when I was tired, I was pretty impressed. The game's got some pretty simple graphics, but they're very effective, and there's a lot of story in here that's pretty accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a pretty novel way to play a game because I'm choosing my own adventure, and you've heard me use that term.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, a few times. But there are definitely consequences to my actions, and I have to balance my decisions against my scores at the top of the game. Now, I love the way they've done the scores. It's simple, yet so incredibly effective.
I know, right? It's one of those things that just sort of surprised me. I'm like, this is just a couple of bars and a couple of simple choices, and yet somehow it just really sings.
Well, I'll tell you what, the thing that really, like, if they were just bars by themselves, good, but not great. It's when they show you how much movement is going to be done on the bars.
Right.
But they never tell you which way it's going to go.
Yep.
Yeah. And
simple, isn't it? But it's so clever.
So clever.
So you need to work out from the context of what people are asking you to do, what will happen. And it's always... Then they start adding ones that are unclear and it's a little bit vague, so you don't know which way it'll go. And, and then, it's really clever.
No, totally. It's and the fact that you can sort of hold that card, flicking it either way and just looking at... Especially when they show you the exact same amount of movement over exactly the same bars. Mm-hmm. And you're like, are they both going to make it go... up and down, or are they both? I don't know.
Yeah.
And especially when you're really close to the edge, either filling one up or about to lose everything out of one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would say it's the best individual bit of UI I've seen in a game, and that includes Hearthstone and 80 Days. And I thought both those games were just fantastic bits of UI, like just amazing bits of UI. So
Reigns just built that simplicity straight into it. They just said, let's strip out all the extra nonsense and just focus in on something that really works. And
I mean, if anyone's out there looking at a bit of design, I mean, Hearthstone and 80 Days had a lot of beautiful time and really detailed graphics poured into it, and Reigns doesn't. But Reigns still is one of the best pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, now here we go. Now, I'm tempted to say this isn't really a game.
Mm. And we've been here. Hang on, here we go.
And we've been here many a time before with your...
And we'll be here again, I'm sure.
Interactive stories masquerading as games.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Frankly, I think it is a game.
Hooray!
Well, and I do, because I'm actively trying to walk the tightrope of surviving by my playing actions, rather than progressing my way through a story that includes some game-like elements.
Right.
And I'm very impressed, at least I was initially, about how well they entertain me with the story while I'm playing this game.
Right.
But I'm also impressed with how little I need to understand the whole story that's being thrown at me to still be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, you don't need any greater contextual understanding to make a decision as to whether or not to build a well, right? Yeah. So, in 80 Days, I know that when I played it for a little bit, I got a little bit lost in some places going, what am I trying to do? But yeah, with Reigns, you never get lost. You're just pretty straightforward.
It's interesting you bring up 80 Days because I'm going to go into the next section because I think this game, I mean, you got me to play 80 Days, then this game, obviously for a reason. And I mean, I found myself referring back in my own mind to 80 Days a lot while I was playing this game, and especially when I was getting together the notes for this recording session. So the parallels to 80 Days couldn't be more striking. On the face of it, they are both the same thing. A branching story, a choose your own adventure, controlled by decision mechanics that look and feel like a game, right?
Right.
But deeper in, they couldn't be more different. They just could not be more different. In Reigns, the game loop is short. I feel a similar emotion to dying in Reigns as I did in Hotline Miami. I'm not really bothered by it.
Yeah.
Oh
no.
Yeah. In Reigns, I progress through the game. I'm getting new powers, achieving missions, learning skills to play the game better. In 80 Days, I kind of did the same thing with getting goods and discovering new travel routes.
But at the end of the day, you're the same at the start as the end.
But that's the thing. They were. They're all very much felt like the same parts of a different storylines, but nothing that really mattered to me to achieve that was going to change the game in any way, shape, or form for me.
Right.
In Reigns, these gameplay elements feel separate to the story, but also tied into the story closely at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. So a perfect example of this is dueling in the game. So
right.
In 80 days near the end of the game, I got in this fist fight, right? And they tried to make it like a game, but instead it was just like a faster piece of the story.
Right.
Now in Reigns, the duels feel more like a game. I can see a visualization of them up the top of the screen, which actually matters. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually matters how far away the characters are.
Yep.
And from each duel, I often learn new moves and skills, which I can then take forward into the next one.
Yep.
Which is, I thought that was really, really clever.
And they're simple. It's very simple. It's nothing fancy. And then there's also that labyrinth crawling game that you may have stumbled across.
Yeah. And it's
just little things. They're not crazy complicated, or they're not super special, but they're enough to spice it all up and make it interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, before I was like, I didn't want to jump off the main storyline, because once you drop down into one of those caves, you're essentially gone, mm-hmm. right? But it was like there were skeletons down there to fight, and there was, like you said, you sort of crawl around and find different things, and whatever you find and use or win, mm-hmm. you can pick up and use in the next reign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, another thing I think Reigns has over 80 days is that in terms of story. Reigns has its own unique storylines, albeit stereotypical medieval fare, right? Whereas 80 Days was just a Jules Verne novel with some extra steampunky storylines added.
Yeah.
And the story in Reigns is more about getting to know different characters,
right? Yeah.
Rather than following a single story arc from start to finish. Mm-hmm. This, combined with the short play sessions, I'm really digging as a way of presenting story to me. Now, I am a bit biased. I do much prefer character-based stories mm-hmm. than I prefer plot-driven stories.
Right. And I think it's a bit of a false distinction in a lot of ways, because a good character series just sits around and it's home and away, right? Even if they had good characters, or it's still pretty crap. And a good plot helps drive it along, but if you don't care about the characters, nothing matters. So you kind of need a bit of both, I think. But I get your point that you prefer the characters side of it more than the plot.
You are right. I mean, to make anything great, you need a good dose of both. So now I'm going to go into how I finished up with this game, because I'm definitely finished with Reigns, right? Mm-hmm. I played up to the 42nd King. I did about 31 of 45 Royal Deeds.
Nice.
Got 530 cards.
You got a fair way through the game, man.
I did. I seriously did. So I could see myself picking this up every now and then just as a time waster, because it's on my phone, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm over wanting to pick it up regularly to play. They did a good job keeping me interested as long as they did. There's not a lot to the game once you play through about a dozen times or so. So I was really impressed how they were able to keep me keep throwing up some new content every now and then.
Yeah.
It became less a game and more like flicking through my newsfeed on Facebook as I played it more.
That's interesting.
And the reason I thought this was, I wasn't really bothered about staying alive. I was just going through the motions, hoping to see some new cards and maybe hit on some of the missions that I hadn't yet achieved. That's pretty different to how I was playing at the start, when I was very much still trying to stay alive, trying to beat my best score.
Right.
But that's why I think it'd be a good time waster, because just as Facebook feed is, I can easily flick through it and I'm guaranteed to see something half interesting most times.
Right. So maybe there's a game in having a fake Facebook feed.
Yeah, or there's a game in being on Facebook.
Yeah, it's a good game.
The game is your life. Play it.
Where Facebook will most likely win out is because they have endless content.
That's true, yeah.
And this game does not have endless content. So I really dug what they attempted with this game. When I played 80 Days, one of my biggest things that bored me with it in the end was it wasn't an original story. Mm-hmm. And the story they had was spread pretty thin, so it wasn't that engaging a lot of the time.
Yeah, there were good moments, but in the general day-to-day, it was like, eh.
Here, at least, they wrote an entirely new story, albeit with some pretty well-worn tropes. So at least I was seeing new stuff a lot. So unlike 80 Days, there was a larger story arc to keep me going through the game. New things were happening, but none of them seemed to be driving me forward to their conclusion. Now, whilst I may have been more bored by 80 Days and Reigns in terms of the stories, I did play more of 80 Days.
Right, but did you play that more in one big session, or did you sort of divide that one up a little?
Well, I divided it up into a few chunks, but you know what? Even though I criticised it for that larger story arc, which helped spread the story quite thin,
yep,
it did actually drive me through the game further.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So all in all, would you recommend Reigns?
Well, look, I'm on the fence about what Reigns does as a storytelling method. At first, I was blown away by how clever it was and how it could have short, fast games, but still uncover a lot longer story over the course of many games. If you'd asked me before my 30th reign, I would have said this is a genius way to tell a story. But after playing past there, I'm less sure. It fell away pretty fast after that, and it stopped being as interesting. Now, I don't exactly know what caused that, but I've got 3 ideas.
Right.
1, the gameplay changed up by simply stuffing me around with the way the cards affected my 4 scores.
Right. So they had these weird gimmicks where they would just hide random text and things and...
Gimmicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really did feel gimmicky, right?
Right.
Number 2 was the things you could reveal and achieve seemed to dry up pretty quick.
Right, yeah. You're achieving less per run.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the duels were the worst affected, at least for me. At the start, I was really hanging out to learn more special moves and fight more duels, and to see what else I could learn and discover via that. But nothing really came of dueling after the first part of the game. It was all pretty standard fare, so I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it as a little mechanic.
Yeah, I think it's a game that I know I felt like it had stayed my welcome because I didn't really get much further than what you did. I sort of naturally sort of gravitated away, and pretty much for the same reasons of just, I'm not that super engaged with the story anymore. But for the first few hours, I was absolutely in love with it as well.
Look, and I think then the third thing is where I really thought the game would actually, and thinking back on it, would actually go further with it. It's the new characters never went anywhere.
Right, yeah.
So I met that barbarian leader, but we never got past the same conversations each time, even though I was trying different things.
Yeah.
And that was really a chance for them to take that story in an entirely new direction, right?
Yeah.
And the same was with the false prophet. I really thought we were on the verge of unlocking a completely new story.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a gateway to it. But then again, the same things happen every time. It was just like it sort of was an excuse to give me, say, 5 new cards.
Yeah.
But we ended back in the same in the same place.
Story, yeah.
This ranks up there with one of the most interesting things you've ever got me to play. But I'm sort of really disappointed because I feel like this is something I would have really dug.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Reigns 2 might answer and address a lot of those problems if they make it.
Isn't there? I was seeing when I was buying the game, there was something about a queen.
Oh,
there's a Reigns queen or something.
That does ring a bell. I have to check it out.
Cool. And did you
maybe if any of our listeners, could give us a tip as to what Reigns Queens is about?
Okay, done.
Yeah,
listeners, we'd love to hear. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Reigns as well. What did you take away from Reigns as someone who is a pretty hardcore gamer?
So after playing a bunch of mobile games for a little while, I got sick of just how messy they all are. They're all, lots of subsystems, terrible UI, an overall kind of mediocre experience, and nothing that you walk away with anything more than just, this is here to either grab my money or grab a bit of my attention for the day. And Reigns stood out to me as a game that was trying to harken back to older days where games were more about trying to do something interesting, even if it failed in doing so, doing something interesting and trying something simple and effective, and bringing mobile to what it's really good at, where it's very simple and very gesture driven and just a very native experience. I think that's the real key that I took away from that, is to try and make games that are like cut it down to the bit that's really interesting and make that bit really, really good. And you'll get a lot further than trying to add in 20 systems to a game. And
you think this particularly relates to mobile games?
Especially with mobile games. I mean, it's true again of PC games as well, to try and keep things simple, but I think with PC games there's a lot more expectation about graphics and high fidelity. And
well, I mean, I know another game which definitely hit the mark with me was Flick Heroes, and you can get that on Google Play and iOS. Now, dear listeners, my reign as king might have been brutally short,
which is a good thing.
But our reign in the podcasting domain isn't going to be short, because you're going to rate and review us on iTunes. You're going to give us some of those thumbs up or thumbs down and some comments on YouTube. What else are they going to do for us, Sam?
They're going to
listen to our desperate pleading for them to do so.
They're going to listen to us on SoundCloud.
And maybe give us what on SoundCloud, Sam?
Oh, give us a bell?
A heart.
A heart,
or a comment,
I mean, just
or
fill up a random shape and just we'll do that.
Yeah.
And then
any sort of...
you can circle us on Facebook, and you can
square us on
Twitter. Yeah.
Follow us on Facebook, and we attempted a live Facebook feed for this show. So you've got to be on that Facebook, people.
Oh, you've got to be there.
Got to be
there.
Got to be
all
there.
the good stuff.
He's the king. You got to listen.
Yeah, the content is so sweet. It's sweeter than mother's milk itself.
Oh, he's right. He's right, and he knows stuff.
Yeah. He knows
mother's milk.
You bet he does.
I did last Friday night, y'all.
All right, we've taken up enough of your time.
Let us hope this next musician's reign is longer than my
Sentence.
That was pretty good.
You like that? Yeah. We sort of came up with it together.
No, it's good. That's what Daddy likes.
Watching the world through a broken window.